Smythe.
Jewel is very lovely, even though she occasionally gets my surname wrong. The biggest issue with mainstream media, because we all had a particular thing to speak about tonight, my topic, I drew the straw of censorship, particularly. And I think Jewel pretty much did all my speech for me with that video. So there's not really much more I can say. But there are different types of censorship. There are different types of... Oh, definitely. There are different types of censorship as well. And what a lot of people don't realize that apart from the obvious private platforms, you've got Facebook, Patreon, YouTube, Google, Twitter, etc. There's also the tacitly known but not often publicly acknowledged censorship that goes on in the community, like with your friends, with your family. And there's a lot of peer pressure as well. So, for example, think of it this way. How many people who were polled in the United States of America in 2015, 2016, once Donald Trump had been selected as the Republican nominee, how many people actually admitted that they were going to vote for Trump? Exactly. Not many people actually admitted to pollsters that they'd be voting for Trump. That's one of the reasons why everyone said, oh, Hillary Clinton's just going to walk it through. Unfortunately for the pollsters, people lie. They don't lie because they want to deceive. They lie because they're afraid of what their peers, their friends, and their family might think. Think of it this way, as in another way. How many of you delicately steer around and avoid political conversations with friends and family? Quite a few. I see Malcolm putting his hand up. It's my family. I am sort of the black sheep of my family, as it were, because I am, well, very conservative. And my family, well, they are not. Although it's more because it's a rebellion thing against my grandparents, I suspect. My grandparents were from the pre-war generation, so the pre-boomer generation. My mother and her siblings are boomers, and they grew up at the beginning of the long march through the institutions, and as such, they, for the most part, were indoctrinated. But thank God they are starting to slowly wake up. The thing is, though, when you have a discussion about a political topic, and as Jules said, I'm very much a political animal. So politics is something I used to live and breathe. I still do to a point. That's why I do the weekly podcasts on The Unshackled, and I call it as it is. I actually had a whole speech written, so I apologize if I'm rambling a little bit. I'm a lot better reading from a prepared script than off the cuff. But one thing I will say about alt media versus mainstream media, how do you know that you can trust alt media any more than the mainstream media? The bitter truth is you can't know for sure. What you can do, however, is you can decide and discern what the agendas of the mainstream media are versus the vloggers and bloggers of the internet and the alternative media. Most people in alternative media will admit to their own biases. So, for example, the editor-in-chief at The Unshackled is a libertarian. The deputy editor calls himself a centrist, although I call him a leftist because... You'll get your turn. Yeah, he is. Anyway, and then there's me, a conservative, someone who is quite staunchly patriotic and conservative. And then there are some people, there is even one editor who will remain nameless who makes me look like a liberal left-winger by comparison. So we've got a broad spectrum. We are fair. We actually do research all of our articles, our analyses and such. We give fair hearing to all sides. We don't just say, oh, look, such and such said this and they're wrong, period. We say, explain why they're wrong, or we explain why they're hypocritical. in the case of political point scoring between certain people, like Labor and the Greens, for example, or, I'm sorry to use you as an example, between Senator Anning and Senator Hanson, for example, and of course the much more noticeable recently, the stoushes between Malcolm Turnbull and Peter Dutton, which I think a lot of us were quite happy about when Turnbull left. I know I was.
Absolutely ecstatic.
Absolutely ecstatic, yes. I'm going to use that quote. I think we can all safely say that. But I digress. The advantage of alternative media is that people are going to look for news sources that are not only independent of special interests pushing their own agendas, but integrity of and honesty of the people providing the coverage and the analysis. Because we don't get that from the mainstream. All we get is, oh, such and such said this, but they're wrong because blah, blah, blah. They don't look at all of the facts in great length. They don't omit any biases. They say, oh, this is the news. We're authentic journalists. We respect the truth. We report the truth. No, you don't. You don't report the truth. All you do is what your editor tells you to write. And who is your editor owned by? Essentially, the person who writes your paycheck. Who writes your paycheck? The multinational companies that dominate the ownership of mainstream media. So you need to... Sorry, is that me? Sorry. Oh, okay. Anyway, as I was saying, multinational companies. And this was actually in a video published recently by vlogger Friendly Geordies. Now, for those of you who are aware of internet vlogs, Friendly Geordies is actually a bit of a left-wing... How do I put this politely? Left-wing know-it-all. But he did make some very good points in one of his videos. He was talking about how his video criticizing the project the comment section was basically hijacked by people on his own side who are ideologically similar to him because he broke away from the mainstream orthodoxy of left-wing thought. Said, hang on, you're supposed to be left-wing. Why are you attacking the project? And then other people have called him, from his own side, mind you, from his own side, have called him an alt-right Nazi, unquote, because he is not accepting the narrative as it is supposed to be from our lords and masters on high who run the private platforms. It's just, it's abhorrent how people are so cowed into thinking they can't say anything. They can't question the orthodoxy. They can't question the mainstream narrative because it will excommunicate them from the group. It will turn them into social pariahs. And in the case of some of the examples that Jill used up in the video that we just saw, they'll be persecuted through the legal system. One of the main things that got me interested in free speech, as a conservative, we advocate for free speech now because free speech is basically all we have left. But it wasn't always so. But the thing that got me interested in free speech was the case of the Islamic Council of Victoria versus Pastors Scott and Nalia in the early 2000s. For those of you who don't know, Pastors Daniel Scott and Danny Nalia had a seminar on how to proselytize to Muslims to bring them over to Christianity. Now, what the Islamic Council of Victoria did is they sent some white Australian converts to Islam into the seminars to try and find something to launch legal action against. And the complaint was that Pastors Daniel Scott and Danny Nalia were misrepresenting what was actually said in the Quran. Unfortunately for the Islamic Council of Victoria, Daniel Scott, a refugee from Pakistan, by the way, he was actually forced to learn and recite the Quran by heart to keep his job at Quetta University as a professor of mathematics. So when the case came to be heard by the Victorian Civic and Administrative Tribunal, they were found to have vilified, not because they lied, because they didn't lie. They actually told the truth. They actually explained each surah that they cited in their seminars. And the judge, I think it was Judge Higgins at the time, said, well, even though you didn't technically say anything incorrect, your teaching is still causing vilification, and we're still going to jail you for it. And we're going to make you spend $68,000 on a retraction notice and an apology. They appealed it, and they won on appeal. But the point is that the punishment is in the process. So we have an uphill battle. We have on Facebook, going back to the private platforms, on Facebook especially, if you say something even slightly negative or slightly critical of Islam, not even Muslims themselves, just Islam itself as an ideology/religion, you can cop a 30-day ban, sometimes even more than that. And I think a few of us in this room have probably copped a 30-day ban, or several in some cases. But if you insult Christianity, that doesn't breach Facebook's community standards. So just for a test, I actually reported a photo that was insulting to Catholics. I forget what the photo was. It was something insulting Catholics, particularly Mother Mary. And I got the report back saying, oh, this does not violate our community standards. And I'm thinking to myself, if I'd said, for example, and I'm quoting here, Muhammad was a pedophile, unquote, and had a picture of him with Aisha, or a picture purporting to be of him with Aisha, I would have gotten a 30-day ban. Even criticism of the state of Israel is not punished as harshly as criticism of Islam, but that will still get you a 3-day ban or so. But again, Christianity is fair game because apparently we in the West, we Christians, we can handle it. And yes, we can handle it, but that's not the point. It's a gross double standard. It's an uneven playing field, and we need to start fighting back against that. So it's possible, it's ideal that we should actually consider playing the lefties' own game and reporting their posts. Finally, one more thing before I hand over to our friend Dave, is that we have a lot to overcome if we are going to be able to continue to say what we think, and even to think what we think, because Big Brother is watching, and we need to do all that we can to keep our thoughts safe and to guarantee our thoughts. So when there is a will, there is a way, and alt media will basically be the protector of independent thought. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.